My daughter gave every one of her bridesmaids a stunning emerald green gown. She handed me a mustard yellow dress, 2 sizes too big, and said, "It was the only one they had left in your size, Mom." She was smiling when she said it. I am 53 years old. I have worked double shifts at a hospital for 22 years, raised 2 children mostly on my own after my ex-husband walked out, and I have never, not once, asked my daughter Serena for anything. Not a dime, not a favor, not even a thank you most of the time. And I told myself that was fine. That's what mothers do. But standing in that dressing room at the bridal boutique on a Tuesday afternoon in March, holding a dress the color of old mustard, I understood something I had been refusing to understand for a very long time. Let me go back to the beginning, because none of this happened in a vacuum. Serena is my older child. She's 31 now, sharp as a tack, beautiful in the way that makes strangers turn around on the street. She got her father's cheekbones and my stubbornness, and for most of her life I thought that stubbornness was something we shared. A bond, almost. 2 women who didn't back down. My younger one is my son, Joel. He's 28, quiet, steady, the kind of man who shows up with a toolbox when your dishwasher breaks and doesn't say a word about it. He drove 4 hours to help me move into my apartment after the divorce. He called me every Sunday 3 years after that, just to check in. He never missed one. Serena didn't come to help me move. She was busy, she said. A work thing. And I told her it was fine. Because back then I still believed that the love you give doesn't have to come back in equal measure to still mean something. I believed that for a long time. Serena got engaged to a man named Griffin about 18 months ago. Griffin is perfectly nice. He works in commercial real estate, wears khakis on weekends, laughs a little too loudly at his own jokes. But he's kind to her, or at least he seems to be, and when she called me to tell me they were engaged, I cried. Happy tears, the real kind. She asked me to be her maid of honor. I want you to sit with that for a second. Maid of honor, her mother. And I said yes so fast I didn't even let her finish the sentence. Looking back, I think that was the moment she understood exactly how much she had to work with. The planning started that fall. Serena had a vision, and Serena's visions, I have learned over 5 decades of living, tend to be expensive and non-negotiable. The wedding was going to be in May at a vineyard about 2 hours north of the city. 220 guests. A plated dinner, not a buffet, because buffets look cheap in photos. 4 bridesmaids plus me as maid of honor. Emerald green for the whole wedding party. Emerald green. I remember thinking it was a strange choice, a little bold for a spring wedding, but it was her day and I kept my mouth shut. The bridesmaids were her college roommate Petra, 2 women from her office named Chloe and Simone, and Griffin's younger sister Abby. 4 women, all of them in their late 20s or early 30s. All of them, I would later learn, had already been fitted for their gowns by November. I was not told about the fittings. I found out in December, almost by accident. Petra mentioned it in passing at Serena's birthday dinner. Said something about how the dresses were already ordered. Wasn't the neckline gorgeous? I looked at Serena across the table. She looked back at me and said very calmly, "Oh, I was going to talk to you about yours separately, Mom. Yours is a little different. A little different." I asked her what she meant. She said she'd explain later. And then the conversation moved on and I sat there with my wine glass and told myself I was being paranoid. January came. I called Serena 3 times about the dress. She was always busy, always just about to call me back, always promising we'd sort it out soon. February came. Same thing. I started to feel something I didn't want to name. A low, cold feeling in my chest that I kept pushing down. Because she was my daughter and this was her wedding and I was not going to make it about me. Then in early March, she called and asked me to meet her at the bridal boutique on Tuesday after my shift. Said they needed my measurements and she had something to show me. I drove straight from the hospital, still in my scrubs, actually. I didn't even go home to change. I walked into that boutique feeling hopeful. Stupid, maybe. But hopeful. Serena was already there with Petra. They were both holding lattes, looking at accessories in a glass case near the front. When I walked in, Serena turned and smiled that particular smile of hers. The one that doesn't quite reach her eyes, when something's about to happen that she's been planning for a while. She led me to a back room. Hanging on a rack, wrapped in plastic, were 5 dresses. 4 of them were emerald green. Floor length, fitted, with a halter neckline and a low open back. Genuinely stunning. The kind of dress that photographs beautifully and looks like it belongs in a vineyard in May. The fifth dress was mustard yellow, long loose, with 3/4 sleeves and a high neck. It looked like something you'd find at the back of a clearance rack in 2003. She took it off the rack and held it out to me. It was the only one they had left in your size, she said. The emerald didn't come in a 14. This was the only option. I stared at her. I said very quietly, "You've had since October to figure this out." She blinked. "Mom, I just told you, it was a sizing issue. There's nothing I could do. You could have ordered a different style in emerald. You could have told me in October and we could have had one made. You could have called me back any of the 3 times I called you in January." She set her jaw. "I really don't appreciate the tone." Petra was very suddenly very interested in something on her phone. "Serena," I said, "this dress is not emerald green. This dress doesn't match anything in your color palette. I would stand next to 4 women in beautiful green gowns looking like a completely different wedding party." "I think you're overreacting," she said. "It's still formal. It's still floor length. And honestly, Mom." And here she paused, just enough for me to know what was coming. "I wasn't sure an open back halter was the most flattering choice for you anyway. This is more appropriate for your age. More appropriate for your age. I am 53 years old. I run 3 miles 4 times a week. I have carried stretchers, worked back-to-back 12-hour shifts, and raised 2 children through a divorce that nearly broke me. I am not a small woman and I have never pretended to be. But I have never, in 53 years, been made to feel like my body was something that needed to be hidden, and certainly not by my own daughter. At her own wedding, I didn't say any of that. I took the dress from her hands. I said I needed to think about it, and I walked out. I sat in my car in the parking lot for about 20 minutes. I called Joel. He picked up on the second ring, like he always does. I told him what happened. There was a long silence on his end and then he said, "Mom, you know this wasn't about the sizing, right?" I knew. I'd known the moment she smiled when she held out the dress, but hearing someone else say it out loud. Someone who knew us both, who had watched the same family dynamics play out over 30 years. That was something different. That was the moment I stopped feeling confused and started feeling clear. I want to be honest here, because this is important. I considered not going to the wedding at all. I thought about it seriously for about 3 days. I could call her, tell her I wasn't comfortable in the dress, that I'd sit as a guest instead, skip the wedding party entirely. Part of me wanted to, a big part. But here's the thing about having a child who has spent years counting on you to quietly absorb whatever she dishes out. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply not absorb it. Don't explode. Don't disappear. Just show up. Let the thing play out in front of everyone who matters. Serena had counted on 2 outcomes. Either I'd throw a fit and cause a scene, giving her a story to tell about how Mom ruined the wedding, or I'd be so embarrassed by the dress that I'd decline to be in the wedding party at all. Maybe skip the wedding entirely. And she'd have the sympathy of 220 guests, wondering where the mother of the bride was. She had not considered a third option. I kept the dress. I had it altered by a woman named Irene, who has been tailoring my work clothes for about 12 years. Irene is 71 years old and has the hands of an artist. She took that mustard yellow disaster, and she took it in through the waist, shortened it slightly so it didn't drag, adjusted the sleeves, and added a narrow satin belt in a slightly darker gold that she had in her back room. It still wasn't emerald green. It still wasn't what anyone would have chosen. But when Irene was done, it fit me like it had been made for me. And it looked deliberate, like a choice. "You're going to hold your head up," Irene said when I tried it on the second time. It wasn't a question. I said yes. I did my own makeup the morning of the wedding. I'd been doing it for 30 years. I wasn't about to hand that over to someone else on this particular day. I wore my hair up, which I almost never do. I put on the small diamond earrings my mother left me. I looked in the mirror and I thought, okay, the vineyard was beautiful. I'll give Serena that. Rolling hills, white tents, a ceremony space under old oak trees with chairs wrapped in white ribbon. 220 people in their finest, sipping champagne in the afternoon sun. I walked down the aisle ahead of Serena with the 4 bridesmaids in their emerald gowns. I could feel the shift in the room the moment I appeared. This sort of collective pause, a subtle ripple through the crowd. I heard someone behind me say something quietly to the persons to them. I kept walking, eyes forward, hands easy at my sides. The flowers I was carrying were white roses, and they looked actually quite beautiful against the mustard yellow, which I suspect Irene knew when she chose the gold belt. I stood at the altar and watched my daughter marry Griffin. I held her bouquet when she needed both hands free. I handed her a tissue when she cried during her vows. I did everything a maid of honor does. At the reception, I sat at the head table. Griffin's mother, a warm, loud woman named Bev who had already hugged me twice that day, leaned over during dinner and said, "Honey, I have to ask, did Serena pick your dress separately?" I noticed it was different from the girls. I smiled. She said it was the only option in my size. Bev looked at me for a long moment. Then she looked down at her plate. Then she said, in a tone that told me everything I needed to know about how clearly she understood what had happened. Other people asked too. Not rudely, more with that slightly confused look people get when something doesn't quite add up. "Oh, did you choose a different style? Is that a different shade of green?" Some of them were genuinely just trying to figure out the color scheme. By the third or fourth conversation, I realized that most people assumed Serena had made a mistake. Nobody assumed the mother of the bride had been deliberately dressed differently from the rest of the wedding party. That kind of cruelty, most people figured, was too strange to be intentional. But Griffin's best man figured it out. His name is Owen, and he's been Griffin's friend since college. Observant guy, not much of a talker, but the kind of person who notices things. He came up to me at the bar between dinner and dancing and said very quietly, "You look great for what it's worth. The dress actually suits you." He hesitated. I don't think it was an accident. I thanked him. I meant it. Griffin, for his part, seemed genuinely confused every time he glanced at me during the ceremony. I could see the little furrow in his brow when he was standing at the altar and I walked down the aisle. He's not a stupid man. He put it together, or at least most of it. The dancing started. I danced with Joel, who had driven up from the city and spent most of the cocktail hour quietly furious in a way only I could read. He held me out on the dance floor and said, low enough that no one around us could hear, "I want you to know that Serena is going to hear from me about this." I told him not to. "Not tonight, not at the wedding. Let it be what it already is," I said. "Don't give her a scene. She doesn't deserve one." He nodded, but his jaw was tight. Serena didn't look at me much that evening. When she did, it was quick. A glance that slid away before it could become anything. I don't know what she was looking for. Embarrassment, maybe. Evidence that her plan had landed, but I wasn't embarrassed. I was tired, and a little sad. And more certain than I had ever been about something I had been slowly learning for years. Near the end of the night, she found me near the dessert table. The music was still going. Guests were still dancing. The night was warm and everything smelled like roses and cut grass. She came to stand next to me, and for a moment we just looked out at the dance floor together. Then she said, "I'm glad you came, Mom." I looked at her. My daughter, 31 years old, in the most beautiful white dress I have ever seen. On the happiest day of her life. A day I had helped plan and fund and show up for, fully and without conditions. I said, "I'm glad I came too." And I meant it. But not in the way she probably wanted. 3 weeks after the wedding, the photographer sent over the full gallery. Serena called me the day she got it, and I could tell from the first second of her voice that something was wrong. "The photos," she said. I waited. They're beautiful, obviously. But in all the group shots, all the bridal party photos, you stand out, Mom. Really stand out. The colorist tried to do some editing, but she stopped. "It's just really noticeable." I said nothing. "People are already asking," she said. "Friends who've seen the preview photos. They're asking why the maid of honor is in a different dress ed. What are you telling them?" Silence. "Serena, what are you telling people?" And finally, quietly, she said, "I don't know what to tell them." I let that sit for a moment. Then I said, "You know, when I was standing at the boutique and you handed me that dress, I thought about walking out. I really did. But I decided to show up anyway. I thought, whatever your reasons were, I was still your mother, and it was still your wedding, and I could rise above it." I paused. "So I did. I wore the dress. I stood at your altar. I held your flowers and your vows and your bouquet. And now the photographs are going to show that forever, that your mother was there, in whatever dress she was handed, and she showed up with her head up." Another long silence. I didn't think it would look like that in the photos, she said. It was the closest thing to an admission I was ever going to get. I know, I said. I didn't say anything else. I didn't need to. In the months after the wedding, something shifted. Slowly, the way seasons change, not all at once. Griffin asked Serena about it directly. Owen had apparently said something to him shortly after the reception, and Griffin had been turning it over ever since. I don't know exactly what was said between them. I wasn't there, but Serena called me in August, about 10 weeks after the wedding, and she asked if she could come over. She sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea, and she didn't look like the bride in the photos. She looked like my daughter, which is a different thing entirely, she said. I think I've treated you badly for a long time, not just the dress, for a long time. I poured my own tea. I sat down, I said. Yes, you have. She looked up at me, maybe a little surprised that I didn't soften it. I don't know exactly why, she said. I've been thinking about it and I don't have a clean answer. I think I was angry at you for things that weren't your fault. For the divorce. For working so much. She stopped. I don't know. Maybe for just being there when I wanted someone to be angry at. I said. I spent a lot of years letting you be angry at me because I thought that was what you needed. I know. It wasn't what you needed. She didn't argue with that. We sat there for a little while with the tea and the late August light coming through the kitchen window. And I thought about what it means to love someone who has hurt you. Not romantically. The way people talk about in songs. But the deeper kind, the bone-deep kind, the kind that doesn't go away no matter how many mustard yellow dresses you're handed. I am not going to tell you that everything is fixed. It isn't. Serena and I are in the early, careful stages of something. I don't know what to call it yet. Rebuilding, maybe. Or just building, for the first time, something honest. She has started calling on Sundays, which is something she has never done before. We talk about ordinary things. Her work, my garden, what Griffin is cooking on weekends. We don't talk about the dress usually. We don't need to. Joel came for Thanksgiving this past year, and the three of us cooked together in my kitchen, which is small and slightly too warm with the oven going. And we bumped into each other and argued about whether to add celery to the stuffing. And I burned the rolls a little, and it was the most ordinary, wonderful thing. I still have the dress, by the way. It's hanging in my closet behind my work clothes. I'm not sure why I kept it. Maybe because Irene's alterations were so good that it seems wrong to throw it away. Maybe because I want to remember what it felt like to stand at an altar in a dress I didn't choose and hold my head up anyway. Maybe because someday, when the moment is right, I'll wear it to a family dinner. Just to see what happens. I'm 53 years old. I have a lot of dinners ahead of me.